volunteers with expertise in interest in historic preservation and design. We generally meet on the second Thursday of the month to review cases. Staff to the Commission are our urban design and historic preservation staff. They are available to answer questions if you have them, but please do not interrupt proceedings if you do indeed need to speak with one of them. The meeting generally proceeds with the staff calling the case and describing it. I will call for the applicant to come forward afterward to add to the basic description of the request if necessary, or if the applicant wishes to do so. If so, the applicant should keep the presentation to 10 minutes or less. The commissioners will then have the opportunity to ask questions. At this point, I will ask if there is anyone in the audience who wishes to speak for or against the proposal. The audience comments shall be kept to 2 minutes per person. If there is, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond. This rebuttal shall not exceed 5 minutes. In most of the cases, we will make a decision tonight after all information has been presented. If your case is denied, or if you feel that our decision was made in error, excuse me, you and anyone with standing have the opportunity to appeal within 30 days of the decision. If you plan to speak about a specific project, you must have signed in. The sheet is at the back of the room. Also, and so that members of the public understand, commissioners are under strict instructions to avoid discussing DDRC meetings and applications with members of the public or with each other outside of these proceedings to avoid ex parte communications. Now, if you wish to speak during the course of these proceedings, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings? Very good. Would staff please call the roll?
Mr. Bachnight. Here. Mr. Broom.
Here.
Mr. Cohn. Here. Ms. Fuller-Wilt.
Here.
Ms. Moore.
Here.
Mr. Savory.
Here.
We have quorum.
Great. Does the agenda order still stand?
We've had one change since the agenda was published. Under the historic portion of the regular agenda, item number 3, 2101 Gervais Street, a request for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill in the Waverly Protection Area has been withdrawn. Otherwise, the agenda stands.
Thank you. We'll move to the consent agenda before we go to the regular agenda. The DDRC utilizes a consent agenda for those projects which require DDRC review but which meet the guidelines and typically require no discussion. If anyone wishes to discuss an item on the consent agenda, I will ask that you speak up after the consent agenda is read, and we can pull the item for discussion onto the regular agenda. Staff, if staff would please read the consent agenda.
The first item is 1231 Geiger Avenue, a request for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill and for design approval for an addition in the Cottontown Bellevue Architectural Conservation District. The next item is 415 Hardin Street, a request for a certificate of approval for a site improvement for an individual landmark. 2414 and 2416 Lincoln Street, a request for a certificate of design approval for exterior changes, an addition, and preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill in the Elmwood Park Architectural Conservation District. 81 Riverview Court, a request for a certificate of design approval for new construction in Earlwood Protection Area B. And 1730 Main Street, a request for a certificate of design approval for exterior changes and preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill for an individual landmark.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to take an item off the consent agenda for discussion? In that case, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda and the November meeting minutes, please?
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion that we approve the consent agenda and the November meeting minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Have a vote, please.
Mr. Bachnight? Yes. Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Before we move on to the regular agenda, we have on our agenda an executive session. I'd like to ask Ms. Fuller-Wilt if she would make a motion to dispense with the executive session, not go into executive session.
Yes, I move that we strike the executive session from the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a vote, please?
Mr. Bachnight? Yes. Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And before I ask staff to present the cases on the regular agenda, I would like to ask that all folks in the audience who would like to make comments on the next two UG Street applications and members of the commission as well, please understand and be respectful of the narrow purview of the Design Development Review Commission. All of us as commissioners in our private lives have different areas of expertise, but the DDRC is specifically addresses very narrowly aesthetic issues with regard to sites and buildings. So while there is commentary on utilities, on traffic impact, on pedestrian impact, in particular when it gets off the site, we are neither invested with the authority nor with the technical expertise to address those. We rely on staff and their advice on those decisions. So I would ask that for all folks who speak today in the audience and on the commission to be mindful of our purview, our narrow purview as the Design Development Review Commission, and also as much as possible to direct your comments and your questions specifically to the design guidelines. With that, if we could have the first case, please.
The first case on the regular agenda is 1328 to 1400 UG Street. This is a request for site plan approval for new construction in the City Center Design District. So the next case is, we have a site plan approval and a design approval for this case, so I think we're sort of going to do just a big presentation, and then you guys will need to do two motions, one for site plan and one for design approval. But just to run through a couple of the quick facts, and then I'll hand it over to the applicant. This is a project that was before you in September for an informational presentation. Then our October meeting was canceled for weather reasons, and then last month the applicant was here for a request for site plan and design approval. The case was deferred till this meeting. There were some outstanding comments on the site plan and the design approval. The motion was for the applicant to go work with the neighborhood and with staff to address some of those comments. They have done so and are back before you with those requests and asking for a decision this evening. So with that said, the applicant, Brad Wolf with the 908 Group, the developer, is here. He has put together a presentation that will talk about the site plan and the design review. As soon as it comes up, it's a large file.
For those of us who interview with PowerPoints on a regular basis, this is a nightmare scenario. Happens all the time in nightmares.
Fingers crossed.
There it is. Hey everybody, I'm Brad Wolf with 908 Group. I've met most of you last time. Tom, you weren't here, and Michelle either, but glad to meet both of you this time. This is our second formal hearing. Last month we got deferred with some conditions to work with the neighborhood and staff to clear some of their comments, and we were here for an informal presentation 2 months before that just to get some DDRC feedback on our design and such. I wasn't here that time because the hurricane wouldn't let me come, but I was here last time and appreciate both the DDRC feedback, staff, and the neighborhood feedback. So we've done some good work since last month. I've been working a lot with Jonathan and Lucinda. I'll kind of address site plan first and then design certificate. On the site plan, we cleared all substantive conditions from staff. There are some remaining conditions, but those are all, as I understand, boilerplate conditions that are on pretty much every approval. And then on the design certificate side, we cleared every staff condition, so there's just a glowing approval recommendation from Lucinda on that, which we're excited about. We wrote down every one of the DDRC member concerns last time I was here, as well as all of the neighborhood concerns, and did our best to address and please everyone in all issues. I don't think we've necessarily resolved every issue with the neighborhood, but we're trying our best, and I think we've made a lot of progress. So onto my PowerPoint presentation. First, I'll talk about the site plan approval request. And Tom, stop me if I start talking about anything outside of purview or that I shouldn't, but because some of these I'm responding to some neighborhood concerns that have come up, which I don't know whether I should be talking about. So let me know if I should just skip over something.
We probably don't need too much emphasis on the traffic impact study, for instance.
Okay, I'll skip those portions. Okay, so here's the city map with the different overlay districts. Green showing the city center design district, as you all know very well. This is our site, 1328 and 1400 UG Street, right in between UG and Pulaski, south of Hampton and north of Lady Street. Just another reference to our location here. A property aerial showing the existing use as the old traffic court building. So going through some of the neighborhood concerns here that we've been trying to address, I think the neighborhood was concerned about the width on Pulaski, not allowing for two-way traffic. So we'll make sure with the new curb cut that we're putting in that it's at least 24.5 feet wide to allow for two-way traffic. Another concern from the neighborhood was that we had 25 outstanding conditions from staff on our approval recommendation. We've cleared all of the substantive conditions. Again, only boilerplate conditions left, and Jonathan can confirm that, I'm sure. Traffic study, I'll skip that. Again, traffic. Parking concerns, we're zoning code compliant, so I don't think there's much to discuss there. The drive aisle on location on Pulaski, the neighborhood was worried that that may be dangerous, so we studied site distance to make sure we had appropriate site distance from the top of the hill on Pulaski. So we're compliant there with our drive aisle location. And one thing we're really excited about that I talked a little bit about last time, Jonathan and Lucinda really encouraged us to do this, is right now, if you're walking south on UG and trying to get over to Lady Street or Gervais, you're kind of out of luck because there's no sidewalk going down UG to Gervais. So we've created a sidewalk along the unnamed right-of-way on the north of our site, which there's none currently, and then a new sidewalk along Pulaski that connects all the way down Lady past our site. So we're bringing a new sidewalk connection here, which I think it's been a problem for a while in this area, and we're excited about solving that to be safer for our future residents and for the neighborhood as a whole. Also, we've been working with the neighborhood really since back in January through our rezoning efforts, so met a lot of times and learned a lot of their site plan and design related concerns way back when, and put a lot of thought into our design from those conversations originally. So such as building height on the Pulaski side is only 3 stories and 2 stories versus 5 stories on UG to make sure we're being sensitive to the condos across the street and preserving their view. Also our amenity location, our pool and outdoor amenities are contained within our building, not outside. So any noise related concerns shouldn't be an issue. And then also parking garage location, no one likes looking at parking garages. So on UG and Pulaski, we've screened that parking garage with our buildings. And on the one visible side, on our south property line, we have trees, and the parking garage is treated with metal screening and brick cladding and is set down below street elevation. So that's just kind of some narrative on the thought process of when we were putting together this site plan. So here's again the existing condition, the old traffic court building owned by the county. And as we walk through this, just want to note, okay, so that's north Hampton Street above, east Pulaski, south the Spring Hill Suites, and west UG. And we're going to rotate this in our plan view because it's kind of crooked. So as you'll see on this next slide, we rotate our plan view. So north, plan view west is Hampton, east there is Pulaski, south is Spring Hill Suites, and west is UG, just to give you some orientation as you look through all of our next site plan slides. This is the existing property survey. as we discussed, no sidewalks there currently. And here's our proposed site plan. For orientation, along the unnamed right-of-way, we have 2-story cottage, townhouse-style apartment buildings. Along the middle, our internal drive aisle from UG to Pulaski sits on top of a huge city stormwater line. That's why we kind of split the site between each other. And then our 3-story apartments along Pulaski, then our 2.5-story parking garage, and then our 5-story apartments as you work your way down UG. And here's the location of our new sidewalk that we're adding. So, you know, if you're walking from UG down to Lady, or our residents from our site, or even the neighborhood across the street could potentially use this. The Spring Hill Suites residents can use this sidewalk. So that should help. Also along UG, the unnamed right-of-way, and Pulaski, we're adding all new street trees and lighting to significantly improve all of those street fronting sides of our building. And to note that the unnamed right-of-way was kind of a weird instance. It's a leftover piece of land owned by the county. You know, technically we're really not required to treat it as a road and add sidewalks and add street lighting and all of that. But again, Jonathan and Lucinda strongly encouraged us to do so. And we listened, and we think it was a great improvement to allow this connection. Here's just a colored version of some of the landscaping on our site plan. On UG, the current sidewalk is closer to the road. So we're going to relocate that sidewalk further from the road to make that a safer pedestrian connection, add a bigger landscape strip in between UG and the new sidewalk. Along the unnamed right-of-way, I think we have a 4-foot landscaping strip, then a sidewalk, then our cottage apartment buildings. And along Pulaski Street, I forget the exact set. The sidewalk is right along the street due to existing power lines, and then our buildings are set back much further from the road, again, for a neighborhood sensitivity to set our building back as a more, you know, residential, private feel. So here's a view. If you're standing on the corner of Pulaski and the unnamed right-of-way, looking southwest towards UG, this is the view you're looking at. And this is that new sidewalk that I've been talking a lot about, from UG along the unnamed right-of-way, down Pulaski, and up to Lady. And we're also replacing along UG the existing street lights with the much nicer looking street lights that's consistent with the design district overlay. And now I'm going to kind of walk you through several of our renderings so you can visualize how our site is laid out. This is the main corner looking southeast towards Pulaski and Lady. This is the existing internal drive aisle with the traffic court building. Our internal drive aisle is going to be in the same location. So this is that same view. This is the main corner of our big building. As you're driving down UG, you know, entering the vista, this is what you'll see. So we've put a lot of emphasis on this corner. I'll get to the facade elements when I make it to the design certificate portion, but now I'll finish talking about the site plan portion first. And also you can see in this rendering the Spring Hill Suites to the south of our building there, which our building will be a little shorter than that due to the grade change. This is a little bit further north up UG, looking the same way, down the unnamed right-of-way. And this is our project view from that location on the corner of UG and the unnamed right-of-way. You can see our 2-story cottage apartments and the 5-story building there. This is another view that just shows the sidewalk going down the unnamed right-of-way. Same view, again, just different perspective here to give you more of a feel for what that street treating and lights and trees will look like down the unnamed right-of-way. So now we're at that same corner as the sidewalk view I showed you from Pulaski and the unnamed right-of-way. Again, our 2-story cottage apartments will be on this corner, and then you'll work your way back up to Pulaski where our 3-story building is. This is the southeast corner of our site on Pulaski, looking northwest towards UG. You can see the Spring Hill Suites to the left and Pulaski going north towards Hampton on the right. And these are the 3-story apartments that are hiding the parking garage that you can see there. Same view, you just get a little bit more view of the Spring Hill Suites parking lot here so that we can show some treatment of the garage and placement of the garage. You can see for site plan layout purposes, we put that garage in between the big building on UG and the small building on Pulaski, and it's 10 feet lower in elevation than Pulaski Street. And that garage is only 25 feet tall. So really the garage only stands 15 feet above Pulaski Street elevation, and it will be hidden by the heavy landscaping and trees in addition to the screening and cladding and such here. I'll skip traffic. I have a lot of traffic slides. Might take me a minute. These are, if you're interested, just showing pedestrian routes to campus from our site, but I know we're not talking about that. These would be the vehicular routes. I have way too many animations. I'm surprised this is working. Most cities it doesn't.
We're an animated city.
Okay, this is back to our site plan, just reiterating some of our thoughtful design sensitivity to the neighborhood, which I've talked about. Contained outdoor amenities, garage screened by the brick elevation and buildings. Only 2- and 3-story buildings across from the condo neighborhood across Pulaski. And then our original design way back was actually garden-style 3-story apartments where our cottage apartments were. So through some of our previous iterations a long while ago with Lucinda and Jonathan, we moved with the help of them to these cottage apartments, which really accomplishes a much more residential, homey neighborhood feel than a 3-story walk-up garden apartment. Highlights on the site plan, we've been working with Jonathan and Lucinda for months. Planning staff recommends approval. There are a few conditions, but as I understand, like I said, those are the conditions that are placed on pretty much every approval recommendation. So I don't think they have any issues. Zoning compliant, no variance requests. That new sidewalk connection is pretty big, and we're happy with how the site plan is laid out, and we hope that you all are as well. So you want me to go straight through my design certificate presentation? All right, I'll do the whole thing. So again, this is just location. I can cruise through this. And to talk through some of the neighborhood and DDRC voting member concerns we heard last time, pretty much everybody hated our Cornices neighborhood and you guys, and ultimately we agreed we changed them. We redid them all. We pulled some inspiration from some of the retail along Gervais. We'll show a picture of it, and that's how we revised them, downsized them, and just paid homage to other buildings in the Vista. So they're gone. More brick. I think Paul mentioned wanting some more brick last time. The neighborhood definitely wants more brick, and we've added a full story of brick along the UG facade wrapping the main corner. And we've added more brick wrapping the visible corner of the parking garage on Pulaski. And I'll show you how we did that there. More detail on garage screening and cladding. That one's kind of hard because you can't tell what it looks like in a rendering. So we took pictures of our architects, Humphrey's other projects, just showing those material selections that we'll get to, so you can visualize more of what those materials will look like on the garage. DDRC made a motion to defer that we work with planning staff in the neighborhood. We've been working with the neighborhood since then. Like I said, I wrote down every one of their concerns and responded to it, made some real plan revisions for several of the concerns, and some of them just responded with, our justification of why we did certain things. And like I said, we've been working with Rick, Bart, Jim, Jonathan, Arsenal Hill, the V&A since January in different efforts. All great guys. We have a difference of opinion on some things, but I hope we've made some progress together, and we're looking forward to be a partner of the neighborhood with them in the future. So here's our old one that everybody hated. We got rid of these cornices and parapets. And then the green area is where we added brick along the UG facade. So that's the old one. And this is the new one here. So these parapets are much smaller, downsized, and very similar to some other buildings along Gervais and the Vista that we'll show you. And then you can see that full story of brick along UG as you're coming down UG as kind of the main corner. So Pulaski, here's the old rendering with the old parapets, and you can see the corner of the garage is not brick there. So we added brick wrapping that corner of the garage because that'll really be the only visible portion of the garage as you're coming down Pulaski. And here's the new one here with the new downsized parapets and the brick wrapping that corner of the garage. Here's the retail building that we pulled from, the retail with the Wet Willies and the Tin Lizzies. We really didn't see a whole lot of any parapet or cornice in the Vista, and that's why we took your recommendation to downsize it, but we wanted a little bit of an element. We read through the city center design guidelines and found it doesn't encourage design uniformity, so we didn't want to look exactly like everything else, but this is where we pulled inspiration from. Here's a view of the Pulaski Street corner facing the garage without landscaping, just so you can see that brick treatment. And then where the garage openings are, it's hard to tell in this rendering, but there will be metal screening over that, and I'll show you examples. So here's what it would look like if you had no landscaping. And then here's what it looks like when you have the heavy landscaping. And our landscape designer with Cox and Dinkins is going to work with Lucinda and Jonathan to make sure we choose proper trees that have foliage during all times of year, so this landscape screening actually works. And like I said, that garage is set down 10 feet from Pulaski, so it's only 15 feet above the street. Just a closer view. So here is a much bigger project, urban project in Gainesville. The only reason I'm showing this is that those metal screens are the ones we've specified in those areas over the parking garage openings. So that's what the metal screen will look like, and then brick treatment on the garage, but obviously a much smaller project. Also, I think Paul and Robert Wynn, who's not here tonight, and the neighborhood, we're all wanting us to reduce the amount of hardy on the building, which we did by adding more brick. And also just wanted to clarify, to make sure we're all on the same page, I've heard people say hardy plank. We will not have any hardy plank on the building, no lap siding. I hate that. I think it looks bad. So we used a hardy panel reveal system, which if you look at this rendering, the portions that aren't brick are that hardy panel reveal system. It looks more like a stucco. I think it looks better than stucco if you do it right and you have a contractor that puts it up right. So that hardy reveal panel system will be the only other element on our building outside of brick. So I've already went over all of this. And these are the same views. I can go back through them if you want. Oh yeah, I'll talk through them briefly. Just showing, brick along UG, all the way to the roof on the cottage apartments, almost all the way to the roof on the big building, wrapping the corner. It's your main street view. That brick going up wraps the corner of that building along the unnamed right-of-way. This is Pulaski, so brick all the way to the roof on the cottage, two-story cottage apartments along Pulaski. More brick wrapping the garage as we discussed, and brick up to the second level on the Pulaski Street elevations. So just highlights. Again, on the design certificate and architectural facade side, we've been working with Jonathan and Lucinda in the neighborhoods for a long time. We have no conditions, full approval recommendation on the design certificate. Pretty glowing narrative, and I appreciate the help the planning staff, neighborhood, and DDRC have worked with us to get there. It's been very rigorous, I won't lie, but I think it's going to be a great project, and I've enjoyed working with the city to get there. We made several design changes to get there, and just from the beginning, I read the full city design guidelines myself after this process became tough, and we're happy about where the project is now. So that's it.
Your red brick, are you specifically matching anything in the district, or is it, or not? That doesn't necessarily matter. I'm just curious.
Good question.
You need to come to the microphone.
So this is Yao Hua, our architect from Humphreys and Partners.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I'm Yao Yu from Humphreys. We have not picked a specific brick yet, but we'll be happy to, look at that, with you guys. I think it probably will be something that fits the neighborhood.
That'd be good.
Similar, yeah.
If you could look to the older buildings, I know you can't match a 100-year-old brick exactly, but something that would be more in keeping with the texture and the color of the original historic buildings in the district. That would be, I think that would be preferable.
Definitely.
Are there any questions for clarification before we move on to comments from the audience on the part of the commissioners? Okay, let me first ask anybody who is in support of the application if they'd like to make comments.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Bob Fuller. I'm here with the applicant, as are the grouping that signed in and is seated on the second row. We don't intend to make any presentation comments. If there are questions that come up, we are available to answer, although Brad doesn't need much help answering, but we are available, but we're not planning to speak.
Thank you.
Mr. Savory, we are in receipt of some comments from the neighborhood that the neighborhood would like to be entered as exhibits to this case. And it is an email from Barton Walrath dated December the 10th, 2018. It is to Lucinda Statler and Jonathan Chambers. And it's regards to their open neighborhood concerns at 1328 and 1400 Hugie Street, site plan and certificate of design.
And was this in our packet?
It was not. It was received after the packets had gone out.
And this wasn't the additional information that was sent yesterday? Or I think something was left out inadvertently. That was not part of the, yeah, that wasn't this at all. Everybody had a chance to look at this? Thank you, Jonathan. Again, I would urge members of the audience and the commission to focus on areas that are within our purview. You know, as I said before, we don't represent on this commission expertise in traffic impact studies and vehicular safety. We rely on the expertise that's provided to the city and on city staff's recommendations to us. We are primarily and entirely a aesthetic review body. So I just want to put, not that we as individuals aren't concerned, but in our capacity as commissioners, that's our narrow purview. So you wanted to, if you could come to the microphone, please, state your name.
My name is Bart Walrath. I'm a resident of the Vista. And what I wanted to say is what we're going to present is an update on the status of the open items that are on that memo.
Good, thank you. Pertaining to the design, the DDRC guidelines, or are these pertaining to traffic impact studies and such?
Well, there is a traffic impact study issue, and I'm confused because that's part of the site plan. Brad Wolf's response to us was that he would have people at this hearing that could answer questions of the DDRC and the neighborhoods. So I'm disappointed if you're saying those are off limits.
I wouldn't say that it's off limits, but I would say that we're not in a position to make technical judgment. So if you're looking to this body to make technical judgment, we're not able to do that. We have to rely on staff recommendations in that respect.
It's certainly not for me. It won't be a detailed traffic analysis question. It's pretty black and white that I think the authors of the traffic impact study, I think, can answer. So that was the agreement, Brad.
That's true, that's fine.
Okay, do you want me to start?
Sure.
Before I use my 2 minutes. Well, I wanted to start by saying the goal of the Arsenal Hill and the Vista is to work together with 908 to create an attractive design that goes well in our historic brick warehouse district, and a development that complements the quality of life and safety in our neighborhoods. We have really three open issues that I want to talk about with respect to the site plan. Another speaker will pick up the open issues on the certificate of design. The first one is Pulaski. Brad has told us that his design accommodates placing asphalt up to the curbing he's putting in. The Public Works from the City of Columbia has told us that they'll repair along the other side of the road. All we asked for is a written comprehensive plan to fix the entire Pulaski roadway and who's going to do what. The site plan issue involves the intersection of Pulaski and Gervais, which we're concerned with and which is in the scope of the site plan. The site plan currently scores that intersection at the worst level right now, and documents the facts that drivers make illegal left-hand turns onto Gervais. And there was just a serious accident there in November. But the site plan states the intersection improves even after the increase in background traffic, as well as 486 new residents 2 blocks down the street. And I think that has to be explained to us why more traffic will make that intersection improve. Basically from a level F to a level E. The parking, we agree with the DDRC discussion on parking. We would like to know the provisions 908 is making for visitor parking and the number of visitor parking and how they figure out that to be adequate, because that'll be the problem with no on-street parking or parking lots anywhere around the site. Those are the 3 issues that I have.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond?
Sure, and on the traffic impact side, I'll invite Tony Shepard from Kimley Horn. He did the third-party traffic study for us to first speak on the Pulaski and Gervais intersection.
If you could state your name, and you've been sworn in?
Yes, sir. Tony Shepard with Kimley Horn and Associates, and we did conduct the traffic impact study concerning the intersection of Pulaski and Gervais. What the gentleman spoke is correct. What you're seeing is looking forward to the background in the future. If you address those illegal maneuvers that are occurring, you get a delay reduction. Basically, we're not applying the violations that we saw in the initial, what people were doing out there going forward, because it is regulatory that those movements are not legal. So we took those out as we go forward with the study looking at the intersection. So that's why you see the actual improvement over time, because of the elimination of those illegal movements that are occurring.
And one thing, I'll leave it to you on how far I get into this, but I actually spent the most of my time on my presentation on traffic, but I guess briefly, on vehicular traffic, the gist of it is, if you're coming from our site and you want to get to campus from a car, you're going to take a left on Lady, and then you're going to take one of 4 rights on Gadsden, Assembly, Park, and I forget the other one. So there are 4 lighted intersections that you could take there. It's not intuitive to go down Gervais and take a left, or you could take a left from our site, go up to Hampton, take that quick one-way on Hampton down to Assembly and get to campus. So there's very easy, intuitive ways, like 9 options to get to campus, so you don't have to take a left on Gervais. So that's the traffic ones. I don't know if, do you want to, should I go every point?
Let me just say one thing. We are getting outside of our purview.
Yeah.
So let's just keep that in mind. Are you finished?
Should I respond to parking and the other issues briefly, or?
Sure, if you want. I think that, am I correct in understanding that parking requirements, in terms of staffs, the city's requirements are being met?
That is correct.
And we're not going to really have much to say about that here in this body. Okay. Yes, sir? Go ahead.
Just a brief rebuttal. I guess they're saying they're counting on increased enforcement to improve that intersection, even with increased traffic flow.
Again, I'm sorry, but this is really outside of the purview of the DDRC.
No, it's part of the traffic, he's saying the way they got the numbers was saying increased traffic enforcement, which I question. And I would also ask why they wouldn't extend the median in that, recommend the median be extended there like they recommended on UG Street.
I'm not saying I don't sympathize with your concerns. I'm not saying that I don't. I'm just saying that this is outside of our purview as commissioners. We have to rely on the expertise of those who make the study and those who receive it at the city and take their advice. That's not our technical expertise area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Could you?
You guys are really punctual.
Let's swear you in.
Okay. Yes,
you did? Okay.
I just want to say up front, I may take a few more than 2 minutes. We got quite a few people, and they kind of, I don't know why they picked me as an old country boy to talk, but they did.
I'm sorry, did you state your name? I can't
Steve Henson.
Okay. Thanks.
But rather than have everybody kind of talk, I was going to talk about design and so on. And it may take a few more minutes because it's kind of a lengthy presentation we're responding to, so hopefully that's okay. And I'm here, we understand that 908 has the right to build here, you know, and we're residents in the Vista. And our only goal is to be sure that it looks good. So aesthetics, as you call it, I guess. So that's all I'm going to talk about is the look of it. And hopefully it will fit into the Vista, the fact that the way it looks and the way it fits into the Vista. When I look out of my condo, this is what I see. That's the lot that I see. And when people come down UG Street and turn on Lady Street, one of the most important intersections in the state is Gervais and UG. And they come right by here when they come into town. And they don't only see the part that's right on UG Street, they see across that spectrum of the whole building. So we think it's important that it look good. When we came here in November to the DDRC asked that the 908 work with the neighborhood. And I'll talk a little bit about the back and forth that we did. We kind of argued more but we got some things done. The cornice looks better, and we appreciate that. And we'd still like a little more detail on the garage cladding. But the main thing we want to talk about is brick. When we came here in September for the preliminary meeting, the DDRC requested more brick. Then we had a hurricane. Then in November we came back and the DDCR asked specifically for 908 to work with us on more brick. So we waited for them to reach out to us on November 30th. They sent us an email with a bunch of information saying they'd added some brick, a little brick to one area on Pulaski and some brick on UG. But we responded and said, well, look at a building that's not in the Vista, 1600 Whaley Street, which is in Olympia. It's near the historic Olympia Mill, and it's all brick. It's an apartment building. And we think it looks great. And that's kind of the look we'd like in this location, which is really much more visible than Olympia because you're right on UG Street. They responded, well, look at the Empire and look at Canal Side. Well, the Empire is on Assembly Street. It's near the State House. It's near the business school and the Koger Center. It's a completely different architectural venue than the area we're talking about. The Canal Side is really not in the Vista at all. It's a completely different area. So we like to go back, and we've done this again and again, but the offices next to them, north of them, are all brick. The hotel south of it is all brick. The State Museum is all brick. The Trustis is all brick. The Publix is all brick. The McDonald's is all brick. And if you talk about residential places right in that area, the Vista Lofts, which y'all are familiar with, which is at the railroad track on Gervais, all brick apartment building. The Vista Commons, which is on Pulaski itself, all brick. And the City Club, which interestingly is just south of the State Museum, as they are just east of the State Museum, all brick. So that's our question, is why can't this building have a lot more brick? When we first started talking in 908, they very convincingly told us that they didn't want to do market rate apartments because student rate apartments are like $800 a bed, so you get $3,200 for a 4-bedroom place, which we accept. Can I keep? I'm sorry. I'm not going to jail or anything. So you get like $3,200, which is much more profitable than a market rate apartment. So we understand that. We understand why they want to build a student housing place. But if that's true, why can't they put as much brick on it as these other places we mentioned, which are right around the neighborhood? And they also, if y'all look at the response they gave to us, they talked about the Hardy panel, you know. And the example that they showed a while ago, to me it doesn't look good at all, that Hardy panel. And I don't think it fits in the Vista. We say the Vista is our beautiful old brick warehouse district, not our beautiful old Hardy panel warehouse district. So we want more brick. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was this. If you look at, I don't know if I should do a handout. Can I do a handout? Is that okay? This is the first one. And then hand out that one, if you would. Thank you very much. That first handout is part of the bigger building. And our concern is that when you look across, you see vast expanses of this Hardy panel when you come across. Again, you don't just see the part that's on the street. You look across there and you see all of it. But the first thing I'm showing y'all, I don't know if the first one, well, I'll wait till they get handed down. The first one is from the presentation in November. See one that's marked up with some pens? Yep. The first one is a presentation in November. The second one is the presentation today. And what you notice is there's less brick on the current presentation. So when 908 was showing all their pretty green things about adding brick, they didn't mention that they deleted brick. And they didn't tell the neighborhood they deleted brick, and they didn't tell the DDRC that they deleted brick. So there's actually less brick. Does that design show, can y'all, it's kind of like Where's Waldo, but see the second one has less brick on it? Significantly less brick.
The one that you drew the arrows on is the first one?
That's the second one. The one from November is the one with the most brick. And then the one with the arrows is the one with less brick, which is the current. So they deleted brick from November until now, even though the DDRC requested they add brick.
So what this shows is that they added brick to the UG Street facade, and they, partially by removing it on the internal.
That's correct.
Road, okay.
So they kind of switched out brick, but that's not exactly the way it was presented, I guess is what I'm saying. So anyway, I know I'm talking about a lot of brick, but our request from the DDRC is the neighborhood, we have gone back and forth with 908, but we think ever since September from that initial meeting, the DDRC has requested that they have more brick. And we've tried to work with them, and in our view, they haven't really added any brick at all. They've kind of switched it around. I mean, it may be marginally more, but we're afraid if it gets approved and the DDRC is go back and work with staff, then they'll work with staff like they work with us, which is not really add any kind of brick and make it, fit in with the Vista like we like it to. So respectfully, what we like for y'all to do is either not approve it or defer it until they actually add, a substantial amount of brick so it can look like other buildings like the Vista Commons, like the Vista Lofts, like the City Club, and other residential, and 1600 Whaley, that are pretty much all brick residential units. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Applicant, care to make a statement?
Yes, so there is a net increase in brick. There was one area internal to our drive aisle in the middle of the site on one of the towers where we took brick down a little bit. That's the only place, but there was a net increase in brick on this building. Also, like Steve mentioned, we have significantly more brick than other projects in the city center design district. And as we understood when reading through the city center design guidelines, we found it doesn't encourage design uniformity. And in Lucinda's staff report and her write-up, she indicated that if this building were to be all brick, that would set an unreasonable precedent here. If there are certain places that the DDRC board thinks still need more brick, I'd be happy to explore that with a suggestion to staff. We think there's a ton of brick. We've actually, since the start of this design, which was well before we came to DDRC for our informal presentation with Jonathan and Lucinda, we started with significantly less brick. We've actually added it 4 times, only once since we've actually seen you all, because before we were going off of other projects like Canal Side and Empire and the condos across the street from us actually, which has a significant amount of stucco or hardy, I don't know what it is, above the brick. So we've added a lot. We think it looks great. We think that hardy panel reveal system, when done right, looks fantastic. And we don't want to be the exact same as every building in the Vista. We want to bring our own unique element. But if the board thinks we need a little bit more brick, tell us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who cares to speak in opposition to the application? Okay. Comments from commissioners or questions for anybody? Okay. I didn't expect that. Well, I just sort of as a clarification would like to address 2 things. One is the notion of a motion to work with the neighborhood. I think that was a gesture in good faith, and it was, I think, a good gesture, but it's unorthodox. Really, what we are charged to do, our responsibility, is to simply see, in our estimation, in our interpretation, if projects meet the intent of the design guidelines. My personal preference would be for the project to be entirely brick. I was the architect for the Vista Lofts, but that's not what the design guidelines say. I think that it can be frustrating to be an architect on the DDRC because our charge is to try to enforce the design guidelines as they are, and the design guidelines do not call for projects to be entirely clad in brick. So in that respect, I would encourage you to be active with your members of City Council, to encourage them to perhaps give the DDRC more leeway to make those kinds of judgments, but that's not what the design guidelines say. So I get back to our narrow purview and where we can actually be effective. I think that while the project is not as far as the neighborhood would like it to be, and I sympathize, I understand that on a personal level, I think from the standpoint of a commissioner looking at the guidelines and looking at the process, and I wasn't here in November. Last time I was here was September because of the hurricane, but I did see the initial informational presentation, and my opinion is that it has moved in the right direction. Whether it's moved as far as the community would like to see, I think is a different kind of question. But I would have to agree with staff that it meets the intent of the guidelines. So I think in the balance, it's been a positive process. From what I can see, just has not gotten as far as the neighborhood would wish it would, and I understand that. But again, we're within the confines of the guidelines and what our charge and responsibility is with respect to that. I don't know, before we move to, we need 2 different motions, I guess. Correct. We need a motion to, on the site plan, and then we need a motion on the certificate of design approval. For the site plan, there was a list of, which isn't here, I guess, there was a list of items that needed to be resolved internally with city staff. How do we move forward on a motion like that?
If the commission is inclined to make a recommendation for approval, if you do contingent upon staff comments, that would take all of those.
And that's it. Okay.
That would take all those into consideration, and they would have to implement those.
Okay. Well, let me ask first for a motion on the site plan approval.
I'll move that we make the motion to approve the applicant's site plan for new construction at 1328 and 1400 UG Street with in keeping and working with staff for all the agency comments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Could we have a vote?
Mr. Bachnight? Yes. Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And with respect to the certificate of design approval, could I have a motion for that? You want to? Or, pardon?
I'll try, yeah. I make a motion that, I'm going to read this, based on the preceding findings of fact, that I recommend for approval design approval for new construction at 1328 and 1400 UG Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
For approval, right?
For approval,
Yeah.
sorry, yes.
Any discussion? Would Ms. Fuller-Wilt be amenable to amending that to ask the applicant to look at the possibility of working with city staff to look at the possibility of providing additional masonry to public facades?
Yes, as long as I don't have to say all that. Can we use what Tom said? I would agree to amend my motion.
Okay, then I guess we've had a second, so move to vote.
You second
Oh,
that?
yeah, I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Bachnight?
Can you think of a way? An additional 20% to the public facades? Would that suit you?
I think that's more palatable.
Okay. Stand is amended, then the second still stands?
It does.
Mr. Bachnight?
Yes.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, please.
This is 3215 Michigan Street within the Melrose Heights Oaklawn Architectural Conservation District. This is a request for certificate of design approval for a fence. The request is to keep the fence as is. A 6-foot tall wooden fence was installed on this property sometime around May 2018 without approval or permits, and it was cited as violating the zoning ordinance in September 2018 by a city zoning inspector. The zoning ordinance states, the 6-foot height exceeds the maximum height restriction for front yard setback, and like I said, the fence was installed without permits back in May. The height of the fence in this location also violates the district guidelines, which allows for a maximum height of 4 feet in the front yard setback. The fence was in place before the current owners purchased the property. However, the height of the fence within this location is still a violation of the zoning ordinance and the district guidelines. So while the general design and material use of the fence is appropriate for the district, the height of the fence within the front yard setback is not in keeping with Section 8 of the Melrose Heights Oaklawn Architectural Conservation District Design Guidelines, and therefore staff recommends denial of the request to keep the fence as is.
Any questions for staff?
Where is this located? Oh, Michigan, but where? Where in the city? I'm sorry. Where is this in the city?
Melrose Heights, Oaklawn. It's by Dreer High School.
Is somebody representing the applicant wishing to speak? State your name, you've been sworn in.
Jenna Cox. I did not.
Okay. You promise to tell the truth?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your time. I'm here this afternoon, like she said, I bought this home this summer. My wife and I purchased the home in July. We first saw the home on the market on Zillow in May 2018, in which case the fence was up. If we went to Zillow now, those pictures are still there. Then in September is whenever we received the notice. I did speak with the property owner at the time for the house on the left-hand side. If you're looking at 3215, which is 3213, was Bullen, Ligon, Walker and Associates. They have since sold the home to Suzanne and Carter Bagley, and they are amenable to the fence staying as is. I also reached out to the property manager on the right, for the right side, which is also Bullen, Ligon, Walker and Associates, and they were amenable to it staying as is as well. I think my neighbor, one of the tenants there, is here as well. We did actually speak towards, we like the aesthetic of the fence. Whenever we purchased the home, did not realize it was against guidelines, and we have a lot of other projects that are, I guess, even some unexpected things that were financial expenditures that you'll find in old homes that I have found with my first purchase of an old home that we just weren't expecting to make this a priority right away and was unaware. So I guess that we were hopeful that it could stay since our neighbors on each side were amenable. And then at some point, whenever we were to redo the fence throughout the entire yard, because this doesn't show you the back, this is by far the best looking piece of fence in our yard. Anyway, that we would be in accordance at that time once we were ready to do the entire fencing.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Clarifications?
This may be the most odd circumstance we've had come before us like this.
Maybe.
You're saying if you do the rest of the fencing, you're open to taking this one down?
Like whenever we redo our fencing for the entire thing, then we're open to doing it. It was just an unexpected expense whenever we have had more of those pile up in an older home.
Yeah.
Is there any reason you couldn't just take down the section of fence that is from the front of the home to the where it's in violation? Just remove it until such time that you can replace all of it?
So that's to, like, basically there was an existing fence there. It looks kind of like chicken wire. That's kind of, if you flip to the other picture, you can see that there's some form of a semblance. There is some of a fencing there, which is a little bit what you see in our backyard. I do think that we appreciate there being some fencing there. We both have larger dogs at our homes. I think that that's been nice to have some barrier with that if they were to be in the front yard going on walks and things like that.
Of course, nobody's saying you can't have a fence. They're just saying it's too tall.
That's right.
Any other questions for the applicant before we move on?
Were you asking about bringing the fence back or just lowering the portion from the corner?
I wasn't asking.
I was asking.
I was saying just remove that, the section that's in violation. That way it's no cost to you. You're just removing it until such time that you can put in the proper height. Is that a possible solution?
Yes, and that was my response about appreciating the fencing being there with two large dogs at each home.
This is along the driveway?
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
not in an enclosed area, so I'm not
Yes,
quite
ma'am.
sure how it affects the dogs.
They're not like off leash. That's not what I'm saying. I realize that that's against city codes and whatnot. But just coming back and forth, and if that was to happen, knowing that there was somewhat more of a barrier there, like more of a fence than the chicken wire type design that's on the back side.
Anything else?
It's the front side yard. How far does that
It
change
goes
to
all
the
way-
side yard?
It goes all the way back to the front of the house, from what I understand, that the zoning inspector, Stephen Green, who stopped by my house, basically back to where the front of our home is. So that would be, it looks like maybe 20 feet. I haven't measured it, but I'm.
So it would be 4 feet. It's currently 6 feet.
Yes, sir.
4 feet for 20 feet to the front of the house, and then, so we're talking about 20 feet, we're talking
Looks like it's a little more than that, but anyway. Yeah.
40,
It may be
40
more
square feet of fence that needs to be removed,
Yes, sir.
and it would be compliant. So she can modify what's there just by,
I think that
The
I
skill
don't have
saw?
yeah. I do not have designs similar to the last presentation. I apologize, but I think that
I'm
would
just
actually
trying to
look
get the
worse
quantity
for the neighborhood.
of
I mean,
what's
I
in
can certainly
violation.
do that.
So,
I would think that would look worse, but that's y'all's decision.
but that conforms to the design guidelines.
Right. So
That's
yeah, it
what's
is-
in question.
it's
You
a-
went in, cut it off. The design of the fence is acceptable.
Right, yes. And I think in the past, we've had one that was much taller than this, that they were required to lower it, and they were able to just cut it and then kind of cap it.
Right.
So kind of finish it off at the top.
You're referring to just lowering it? Or are we talking about?
When you look at the back side, I mean, it's a,
Yeah.
you 2x4s between the posts and then cut it off and it's done. I mean, yeah, it's
My
not-
thoughts too.
Yeah.
It's not a lot to, you don't have to tear it down and start over.
Right.
Anything else that you care to say before we move on?
I figured it was worth a try.
Well, we're not done yet, so, I mean, anybody here other than a family member in support of the, or anybody opposed? Okay. Any further discussion on the part of?
One question, can you put a time constraint on this? I mean, to be accomplished within the next 12 months?
Can we put a time constraint for the next 12 months? I mean, we're okay with working with them with that time. I would have to talk with the zoning inspector since there is an open violation.
I understand prioritizing home projects.
Right,
So if we could put a 12-month to accomplish this, would that help you?
If it's compliant with zoning.
Okay.
I would have that caveat. If you were
Yeah,
about to
yeah.
make a motion of something.
I don't even know if, okay, I've got a motion.
Would anyone care to make a motion?
Okay. I move that the fence at 3215 be brought into compliance by lowering it 2 feet to the front of the house within the next 12 months,
Contingent on,
upon zoning approval.
I second that.
any discussion? Could we have a vote?
Mr. Bachnight?
Yes.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller-Wilt?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Savory?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you. Next item, please. Or other business.
Under other business, we have an informational presentation for some feedback from y'all on 1230 Sumter Street, which is the Keenan Building. Tara Jordan is here to talk you through the site plan and some of the exterior changes that are proposed.
Hi, so I'm Tara Jordan with Boudreaux, and we are on behalf of the Lady
We
Street
need the
redevelopment.
microphone closer to you, I think.
Sorry. Hi.
You've been sworn in?
Is this better? Yes, sir, I have. So my name is Tara Jordan with Boudreaux, and we are speaking on behalf of the Lady Street Redevelopment, LLC. And they are the current owners of the, it's a former Keenan office complex that is located on 1310.
Still need the microphone a little closer. We're having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, is this better? They are located at 1310 Lady Street. It's the former Keenan office complex building. That also includes several Sumter Street addresses, which I believe is addressed as the 1230 Sumter Street. And up here, we have a site plan of this. So there are, I don't know if you can read, the resolution's a little difficult to read. Amy, do we have the DD, like the original presentation? Or just the full site plan? Okay, so this is actually the full site plan presentation. Okay.
So I just put it exactly in the order that you said.
Okay.
So,
I was just trying. Here, we can start here. This will be easier. That's okay. Okay, so this is the aerial image of the property. So you can see the corner of Lady and Sumter. So on the corner is the 6-story building, and that was built in the 1920s. And then the 10-story building that's adjacent to that was built in 1950, and that was built deliberately as an addition to that building. And then the 3-story building that faces Sumter Street was added in the 80s, and then these all became part of the Keenan office complex. So here's some existing photos, and as y'all may recall, it used to have some cladding around the exterior.
May I just interrupt you for 1 minute? I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit unclear on, I want to listen properly. So what is it that we're giving, as a body, what are we giving feedback on?
So y'all are gonna be reviewing the site plan, just as you did for the UG Street project today. You'll be seeing that next month. So you'll have very similar comments coming at you. And then exterior changes that Tara will talk about on this building. So they're looking for a certificate of design approval for some of those. This building already has the Bailey bill on it, but some of the changes were things that hadn't previously been really looked at. So I wanted to bring it back to y'all for the entries, for instance.
But this is just for information.
This is just for information today. So if anything sticks out at you, if you have questions, if something seems off, that would be valuable information for Boudreaux to have.
Could you tell us what your current thinking is? Are you going to be submitting approval for what they've presented to you, or do you have,
Yes.
I just want to put it in perspective.
Sure, yeah. No, I think what they're doing is in line with the guidelines. I think they're planning to do rehabilitation work that's in keeping with the building and with the Bailey bill.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. So these are some existing photos of the original buildings to give you a point of reference. So those are currently, or were all business use and largely abandoned, and so these will be renovated from business to residential use for market rate apartments, and that will be 109 apartments total with new commercial lease space on the street level. And then there will be some additional parking that's not required by zoning, but it will also be provided in the Marion Street Garage, which is adjacent to the building and actually connects to it. So here's a site plan, and you can see where the existing 6-story, the existing 10-story building, the existing 3-story. There is a courtyard in the middle that we are proposing, so that is actually, if you see the 1-story large canopy that comes out, we are proposing to demolish that canopy and that 1-story portion of the building to open up a new courtyard, which will act as, will be partially public, partially private, and you can see on the site plan, basically that first third will be open to the sidewalk, and that will have entrances to the to some of the commercial retail space that we are proposing, and then the back portion will be private use for tenant amenities. This is a proposed elevation, which the approach for the 6-story building, which was built in the 20s, is that we'll come back and try to restore some of the old cornice work that was removed, and as well we'll reestablish the corner entries on the building, which we can see were there from the historic photos, and then the primary entrance will be on Lady Street for the tenants, and that's where the current building entrance is now, and we're proposing a new canopy over that entry facade. And then this is a Sumter Street elevation. We're doing very minimal work at the ground level. We are only putting in the new entrances, but the existing storefront will remain, but we're proposing to put clear glazing. Currently it's all tinted, so you cannot see in it all, so we're proposing to do clear glazing to help activate that street level and being more in accordance with current design guidelines. And you can see in this elevation to the courtyard that we're proposing, the very tall object is a green wall feature, which we imagine this to be a hybrid of a landscape and art feature that will be almost like a living wall, and to add some green space to Sumter Street and provide as a sort of landmark along Sumter Street, which is not very lively at the moment. So these are some perspectives. You can see the corner entry that we're planning to reestablish, the corner of Lady and Sumter in the 6-story building. And this is a view also looking at the corner of Lady and Sumter. And this is walking down Lady Street, and then that view from Sumter Street, so you see the scale of the green feature that we're proposing. And then this is a view into the courtyard that we're establishing by the demoing that 1-story building. The truss work that you see up there is actually planned to be reused from the 1-story structure that's currently there, to provide some infrastructure and help define the space, but also to tell the story of what was once in that space. We have included some of the floor plans, and that will be more comprehensive with the site plan review. We can go to I believe this may be hard to read. Do you want the hard copy? Have a pointer on it. So the corner, if you can see it, at the north of the page is the Lady Street, and then to the left is Sumter Street elevation. So at that front corner, you can see that outline. So that would be a proposed commercial tenant space, more of a cafe or market type tenant. And then to the plan south of that, in the 3-story, would be a proposed pop-up retail space, and both of these spaces are connecting to that public courtyard. So the idea being that that courtyard can be an overflow space from those tenants to have a street market type vibe, to again help activate Sumter Street, which is pretty barren at this point in time. And the majority of the other floor, the rest of the ground level will be for residential use. There is a current tenant in the 10-story building, which is a salon that will remain, and then some tenant amenity lounge space and leasing offices. But all around the perimeter, around the street front, will be the more public use spaces. But in general, we're not proposing to make a ton of exterior changes. We're really trying to keep in what the distinct character of each building, what they bring to the table, and really focusing on trying to restore the 6-story building, and some of those key elements like the cornice work in the corner entry, and then cleaning up, removing the seal that was from the original cladding. And then on the 10-story building, we are planning to keep some of that steel that got added in the 70s with the cladding, but we will remove the corrugated metal that's from the back and clean that up. Partially, it's a structural and cost issue to remove it, but also it helps tell the story of what happened to that building, so we will try to clean that up. And
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch, what when you started talking about the corrugated metal and the structural implications?
At the top of the 10-story building, they built up, you can see there's some still infrastructure that's up there, and so that has corrugated metal on the backside of the steel.
I'm sorry, but I'm not quite catching everything you're saying. So with that, you're doing what?
We would plan to remove the corrugated metal off of the back of the steel, but the actual steel infrastructure would remain. And we would paint that and try to clean that up as much as possible. But on the 6-story building, which has a lot more intricate detailing, we would remove all of the steel cladding and steel infrastructure on that building that you see at the corners and up around the top of the balustrade.
I'm still not quite, I'm sorry.
So
I'm still not quite following
you're
what
not removing, on the 10-story, you're not removing the metal that was added in total. You're leaving what?
Just the steel frame, but not, you see how it looks solid on the back. We would remove that portion.
One of your elevations showed it a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm not seeing corrugated metal up there.
Okay, the frame, you're removing.
I'm not, my frown is not because I don't like what you're talking about. I'm just trying to understand what you're, so
Well, it would look like that?
Are you able, for this perspective,
So
you can see at the top.
This frame that's showing here, you plan to leave it. You've taken all the backing off of it. You're going to clean that metal framing up.
Yes, sir.
And it becomes
an object up there.
Yeah,
Correct.
just to show what was there. What
Help
had
tell
been
the
done.
story of these buildings. But then the 6-story building will be more restored in a sense.
Okay.
What are we going to see behind once the corrugation is removed? Is it
There will be mechanical
cooling
units,
towers?
but the height, they will all be set back from the parapet, so you won't be able to see any of that from the street level. We're also proposing a new roof deck on the roof of the 6-story building, and that actually is modeled in these perspectives, but it will not be visible from the street level.
Sorry, you're proposing what on the 6-story
A
building?
roof deck at top of the 6-story building that connects from the 10-story, and that will not be visible from a street level view.
Well, and so you're adding a cornice on the 6-story building. What is that going to be?
We're actually, and this was approved as part of the previous Bailey bill, but we would propose to use a synthetic material because of the.
It's already been approved? Okay,
it was
never
approved
mind.
as part of the Bailey bill. So the cornice work, with the exception of the ground level, we were proposing to use a lighter material but still replicate the form of the cornice work.
So what you're really showing us today is the new store, basically the new storefront down at the bottom, the new courtyard, and the fact that you're going to take off the corrugated aluminum and leave the structure on top of the 10-story roof. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Exterior changes, and then it will be going to site plan review because of the quantity of the residential units, which is triggering the site plan review. But we don't anticipate, like I said, parking is going to be required, and we don't anticipate. We think it's actually a great addition to the city, and having those buildings actually be occupied and help activate that street corner. We don't anticipate any major concerns with bringing tenants back to that building.
What about the windows?
The windows, so we, as I mentioned before, we were planning to replace the glass on the ground floor, but the existing windows, all of the above floors would remain as they are currently. So those are the tinted glass, and that was all done as part of the 70s renovations.
They are tinted?
Yes, ma'am, they are.
So you're leaving those?
We would leave those, and that's from the second floor and up, but at the ground level where you can see through, we're proposing clear glazing at the street level. And due to the quantity of windows, that's a very large budget item.
Is that it?
That's it.
Any thoughts or comments? I think it's good. It'll be good.
I will mention that we had discussed a little bit about maybe some working out some of the details a little bit more on the courtyard.
Yes.
So there's sort of comprehensive sort of concept behind that, since it's a really nice opportunity between public and private space there.
There's a lot of that on Main Street, isn't there, sort of where Capitol Places did their stuff, and you can see that all.
Well, I should back up. Are you planning to develop further than we're looking at here before you submit it? I assume that.
This is currently what has been submitted for site plan review. The actual building elements have been developed, but the green wall, as we're calling it, has not yet been fully designed. But we would be happy to work with staff on the detailing.
So it's going to be done in phases? It's going to be done in phases, like 1, 2, 3?
Right. We're really like the art piece, the green wall piece is something that will be designed, developed as we go through. But the rest of the building is all planning. The one-story building will be demolished as the first phase, and then the rest of the buildings will all be constructed at the same time.
Every day I come down Lady Street and Sumter Street looking at that building. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. I hope best of luck.
So I understand. So we're going to be looking at it for site plan review, but this view that we're looking at right now, you're anticipating just handling that through staff, the development of that design?
I think we could, if y'all are comfortable with that.
I mean, what would happen is if you're not comfortable, you'll throw it to us. So I just wanted to make sure I understood.
So on the 10-story building, was the first approval removing the paneling on the back? Or is that part of it?
That's actually new to this. It had just been left, and typically where people are leaving existing later elements, we don't require changes to those. So, removing the corrugated aluminum, I hadn't really looked at that, but we can, certainly talk about that.
I just think it has the potential to be
That's the plan.
Is the building occupied now?
It's partially occupied for the most part. There's a few tenants that are lingering that will be moving out. So the Ashley's Alley Salon and Spa, which is in the 6-story in the 10-story building, that will remain, and that's on the ground floor. And then Columbia Smiles, which is a dental office, is actually on the 5th floor of the 6-story building. And those are the only tenants that will continue throughout, and then we're going to be adding the new commercial tenants on the ground floor. Everything else will be residential.
There are bizarre gutted floors because I go to Columbia Smiles and the elevator opened for some reason. It's like a developing
We'll fix
nation
that
there.
too.
Anything else? Anything else from anybody here? Oh, great, thank you.
I appreciate your input.
Any other business?
No.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adjourned.